Reuniting the Spot Whiskey collection back to its former glory for the first time in 56 years. This is the Blue Spot, and it's fantastic. Let's get into it. Hello everybody and welcome to the Whiskey Dictionary. Today is the first episode of Irish Whiskey Month 2021. Now I do Irish Whiskey Month on my channel every March. I know not all of you guys are in love with Irish whiskeys, but it's my job to teach you why you should be. Now Irish whiskeys are underrepresented when you're thinking about different things like bourbon, scotch, whatever. But Irish whiskeys have their place. And this is a great example. Spot whiskeys across the board. Got them all back here and I'll be doing several of them during this month. But Spot whiskey is a great entry into the Irish whiskey scene, along with things like Redbreast. Man, you're talking about some seriously good whiskeys that you're missing out on if you're not trying them. But let's talk Blue Spot, because that's why you're here. So for those of you that don't know, first off, if you'd like to, you can go see a pretty in-depth thing up here about Spot whiskeys, where I kind of went all about the distillery and its history and everything, but a quick little recap. So Mitchell & Sons is the name of the brand that initially started Spot whiskeys. They used to be confectioners. In fact, they were so good that they would make confections for the Queen. And along with confections, they would also make wine. Sounds like a pretty awesome place to work, right? So when they would make wine, they would, age it, do whatever they did with it, and then sell it. And then they had all these extra casks. So they would send them to go get filled with whiskey. When they would come back, they would mark them with a different color paint to indicate the age of the whiskey and what they planned on selling it for. So that's where Spot whiskey comes from. Now, this particular type, the blue, it was missing for a lot of years. So the problem was, with many other Irish distilleries, and actually pretty much distilleries across the world, there was a pretty significant downside during the mid-1900s to kind of the later turn of the 1900s. And a lot of distilleries went under. Now, what happened with Green Spot is that they ended up making less and having access to less whiskey. So they pretty much pared down. They knocked off the blue, then they knocked off the yellow and the red, and only kept the Green Spot around. And eventually, they ended up kind of doing some additional things with the Green Spot, which we'll talk about later this month. But there has been a resurgence in Spot whiskeys. We've gotten the yellow back, we've gotten the red back, and we've also gotten the blue back very recently this year, like a month or two ago. And that's great. I'm so excited. When I found out, now there's the part of my brain that loves to collect things, right? So when I found out that there was this long lost color of Spot whiskey, that's all I wanted. And I remember actually, I think I did this a couple of years ago where I reviewed a bunch of different Spot whiskeys. And I remember thinking to myself, oh man, if only the blue whiskey would come back, then they would have all of them. And getting excited about the Chateau Montelena and Louisville Breton. But I was really excited about both of those just because it's a little bit of a different take on the green. But it's no replacement for the blue. So this is a cask strength whiskey. It's 58.7%. Yep, 58.7%. I shouldn't doubt myself. And it is made of both malted and unmalted barley in a single pot still. Now, pot stills are interesting. They are used for a lot of different types of spirits. The one thing it's not very good at is forming congeners. And it's just not very good at producing that particular, I guess, what would you call it? Molecule in whiskeys. So aside from that, because of that, you're going to end up having a very similar taste to a lot of pot still whiskeys. Of course, you can do different things with them. And in this case, they ended up finishing it in both sherry and Madeira casks. But you're going to have a similar feel to pot still whiskeys, specifically a mouthfeel, specifically a creamy mouthfeel. So let's go ahead and start tasting this as I kind of talk a little bit more. Now, when I pour this, you're going to want to keep in mind, if you have your hands on one of these, that it is, in fact, cask strength. 58.7 is going to burn your little nosy. So you want to be careful, and you want to kind of nose from further away. I say this very often on my channel because I never know where people are coming in. And the last thing I ever want is somebody to buy a whiskey and just burn the heck out of the nose and decide, whiskey burns when you smell it. I don't ever want to do that again. It's just a horrible way to introduce yourself to this whole thing because it's unnecessary. Whiskey is fantastic. And if you smell it far enough away, you're good. Anyway. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, I did have a sip of this prior to the video. I often do my nosing and tasting notes a day or two prior so I can, kind of reflect on them or drink again. As you can see, a little bit's out of this bottle at this point. I had a sip earlier because I've come to learn that when I drink cast strength whiskey on my channel, especially as my first video I'm filming in a night, not the best thing to have the first sip on camera. And if you're familiar with cast strength whiskeys, I'm sure you can see why. That burn in the throat, no matter how much you drink, it's there. Try talking immediately after your sip and you'll see my pain. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the nose of this. So there's several things that stick out to me. And I always take my notes just so I can kind of fall back on them. But I also like to ad-lib, right? So the first thing that I smell is green apple, but specifically baked green apples. It's got this apple pie, apple. So it's got this spiciness comes typically from the single pot still. They even refer to it as single pot still spice, right? It's this element of copper that ends up influencing the whiskey while it's being distilled. So in this case, I get this little bit of spice mixed with green apple, which reminds me of baking an apple pie. And that's how that whole nosing thing works, right? You put things together, you come up with an idea, and you formulate it in your head. So, baked green apples. All that to say baked green apples. Now, here's another unique one. Now, I think when I smell this, actually, there's a little bit of me that thinks of name's escaping me right now. Paul John, the Paul John Select Cask, because there's an element of pineapple here that mixed again with those spices reminds me a little bit of an Indian whiskey. And a lot of Indian whiskeys have pineapple or citrus mixed with a spice. So let's just say pineapple, spicy pineapple. This spice being more along the lines of wooded spice or allspice or not nutmeg. I'm not getting nutmeg in here, but it's not spicy like hot sauce. I just always want to say that because people sometimes question what I mean when I say spicy. It's only the kind of thing that you'll only experience and know if you drink whiskey that a person like myself or yourself would immediately think, oh, spicy. It's spices. It's not hot. All right. So moving along. Toasted oak, which again goes back to the spiciness. Now I'm saying spicy a lot, but I don't want to make you think that is the overbearing nose of this whiskey. In fact, it's more fruit. Now the green tastes a lot like apples, tastes a lot like pears. This is, a cask strength version of a very similar, product. But the cask strength, the higher ABV, brings out different things. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a sip. We're going to go over some tasting notes, and I'm going to add a little bit of water. Now, those of you who have been watching the channel for a long time will know I don't typically do that on camera because there's a lot of things that are cask strength that I just enjoy. However, something like an Irish whiskey has a lot of nuance to it. You just got to look for it a little bit. And when you're reviewing a premium product, at least I am usually looking for layering, something that keeps my interest more than just, oh, that's a good whiskey. And this is a premium product. This is about $100. So let's go ahead and have a taste. Cheers. All right, so first taste, again, being cask strength. I'm going to have another sip because now my mouth is awake. Apparently, it's been a little while since I've had that first sip. I woke my mouth up. It's ready to go. My initial impression is just, okay, higher ABV, maybe a little bit of sweetness, little bit of oakiness, little green apple. But there's more to this, and I'm going to taste it. So cheers again. Oh, actually, let me just take a moment. Cheers to Jason from the Mash and Drum. He helped me in procuring this bottle. They just don't have it in my area. I'm up in Massachusetts. We get everything last. So thank you, Jason, for helping me to get this. Now, the spice is coming across a little bit different in here. Whereas before, it's very indicative of a pot still spice. This is more along the lines of cracked black pepper and the dusty smell that you might get while somebody's that's not how it goes. It's like, freshly ground pepper, kind of sprinkling on whatever you have in front of you. You smell it. It's in the air. you're tasting that. I always love when a smell and a taste are the same, mental link there, because it makes sense, right? Obviously. All right. Black pepper, vanilla, cinnamon. Cinnamon is more on the finish than anything. You might not even taste it until the whiskey has dried in your mouth. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The texture of this whiskey is something that I find particularly interesting in that creaminess comes through. Now, you get this a little bit in Redbreast as well, and it makes sense. They're both made in a very similar way. However, despite all of the spices and the vanilla and the whatever else, you're also getting flowers. You're getting lighter tastes in here. You just need to kind of look for them a little bit more. And when you find them, you're going to be able to focus on it. You're going to be able to pick out things. So like in this case, I'm tasting lilac, or at least the smell of lilac is what I'm tasting. It's a little bit more grassy. It's a little bit more... I know this sounds a little ridiculous. So I'm not going to claim to be like an expert on flowers, but I have always just had a good sense of smell. So I smell flowers plenty. There's a smell in daffodils that reminds me a little bit of the way this whiskey tastes. And although I can't say I've ever eaten... Actually, no, I have eaten a rose petal, actually. Come to think of it, at just fancy dinner. It was on the plate. It was a garnish, and I was like, what the heck? I was with some friends. That is actually interesting. I'm just trying to gauge in my head whether that is in the flavor here. Not necessarily rose, but the texture of eating a flower petal. Am I alone? Like, some of you guys have had a flower petal at some point or another. It's been on your plate, I'm sure. Anyway, I'm not going to say definitively that is in here. I think that's just a little something that it remind me of, but I don't believe that's something I would actually say I'm tasting so much. All right. So here's the deal. I'm going to add some water to this, as I said I would, because I want to be able to get a little bit more nuance out of both the nose and the taste. As always, there's chapters below if you're just kind of looking for my overall review of this. I always try to put chapters so you can skip to whatever part you care about. The Whiskey Dictionary is all things to all people. All right, so on the nose, after adding a little bit of water, there is some of the floweriness that I was just tasting. It's coming across much more in the nose. The citrus notes have completely died down. And I'm talking three drops of water. Now, I don't have a ton of whiskey left, you can see, but 3 drops of water is not much. It's all you need. It's designed to make those fatty acids. That's what I meant to say earlier. I said molecule, fatty acids. Come to the top, and it concentrates them, and you're able to get a little bit more when you nose and or taste. But it's only going to be good for really one sip or for a little bit of time, and it's not going to help if you swirl it around. Now, what it will do is reduce the ABV, which is going to help with your tasting, because a higher ABV whiskey, although is fun, doesn't have the nuance in it. Watering something down at cask strength down to 40% is a fun experiment to try. And if you have a cask strength whiskey, it's something I recommend. Put more water than you think you do. You know, who's keeping track? Put the thing down to 20% ABV if you want. Try it, experiment. I certainly have. I've ruined more whiskeys than I care to think about. Thankfully, I have a sizable collection. But yeah, no, it's a thing you should try. You definitely should. All right. Now, there's where the change is. A little bit of water to that taste completely changes the taste of this whiskey. It brings out that creaminess by a factor of 10. It's almost all that you can taste. It coats your mouth. You feel a little bit, still that floweriness is there. The apple, I didn't say apple, sorry. There was a little bit of apple, but it's mostly black pepper. That has been totally quelled. The black pepper is gone. It's just creamy. It's pleasant. It's heavy, but it's delicious. So anyway, I realize this video is getting a little long. I'm totally fine with that. It's fun to explore whiskey a little bit more. Sometimes I just kind of wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, get these things out here. I wanted to take time with this whiskey. It's a cask strength whiskey. You should take your time with it. And it's one that I've been looking forward to for years. And that's a rare thing for me. So super interesting. And I'm very happy to be able to review this one. So thanks again, Jason. All right. Let's give my overview. Now, here's the thing. You might think I'm landing one way or another. I'm not sure where I'm landing yet. I'm going to talk this out just for you guys. So, the Blue Spot whiskey. This is a product. I'm going to pause for just 1 sec because I need to double check the price. All right, sorry about that. So the price is $100. I wanted to double check because I ended up, I forget how much I gave Jason. I think it was like $160, and the other whiskey that he bought from me must have been a lot less. So this is $100. That's a steep price for a 7-year-old cask strength whiskey, Irish whiskey, I should say. Honestly, it's a steep price for really any whiskey at that qualifier. But if you're into Irish whiskey, I can't imagine passing this one up. This is something unique, it's something new, and it's something interesting with a cool history. It's something that I enjoy drinking. I think that you will probably enjoy this too. This is where it's tough. I'm gonna lean back on my usual rating system, as I always do, and I'm gonna give this a try it. Because the $100 is a hard sell. Even if I like the whiskey, it's a hard sell. Is it really good? Yeah. But I'd give it honestly, I don't do this, but if I had to give it like a real rating, probably like an 8 out of 10. It's not amazing because the price brings it down. I would love this whiskey for $75. I would love it a lot for $75. $100 is steep. And if I weren't just so in love with the concept of the blue whiskey, Blue Spot, I would have been a little disappointed spending $100. So try it. See if you can find it at a bar. New whiskeys often make their ways into, whiskey bars. So try it. See what you think. It might not be up your alley, but as far as Irish whiskey goes, it's pretty good. All right. Thank you very much for joining me here on the Whiskey Dictionary. If you haven't yet, check out the Patreon. It's something that really helps the channel out. I buy a lot of whiskey bottles, and that is a huge help. So check out the Patreon. There's stuff in it for you too, and a lot of extra content. I actually film a lot of random videos for those guys. Anyway, thank you, and have a great rest of your night. Cheers.